Am I doing this correct, Justin? I never set up this.
Yeah, I was actually gonna run it for mine, but if you want to do it from there, that's fine too.
I was like, oh, if you want to run it, if you want to drive, please do.
Sure.
I'll stop sharing. That is your prerogative, but I would agree.
Okay. I'd like to call the January 15th, 2026 City of Mill Creek Planning Commission to order. And it's 6 o'clock, so we're going to get started on time here. And then could we have a roll call, please?
Chair Hamilton.
Here.
Vice Chair Schulte.
Here.
Commissioner Brunda.
Here.
Commissioner Briles.
Here.
Commissioner Hutton.
Present.
Commissioner Neff.
Here.
Commissioner O.
So we have 6 of our 7 members present, and there are 4 of us here in the room and 2 people are online, so that's great. So the first item on our agenda then is to approve the minutes of the November 20th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. And I take it people have had a chance to review them. And could we have a motion for them to be modified or approved?
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Have a motion that's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the November 20th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing nobody step forward, we will go ahead and vote. Then those in favor of them being approved, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, good. So we have unanimous approval of the minutes from our November 20th meeting, which was our last one last year. And we have a study session today, and we have one item on the agenda. It's the South Town Center Master Plan Draft Review. And so some of us have been involved in this for years and others for just a few years. So it's going to be great to see how we're doing. So take it away, Justin or Jeff.
Hey, Justin, before we begin, I'd like to provide some framing for the very beginning. So as I briefed to some of you individually before this, the intent of this meeting is to not review the formal official draft of the master plan, but rather the very rough draft of the master plan. We want to make sure that we're being budget conscious and being conscious of our scope of work. And we only have X amount of reviews of the drafts that are created, and also we like talking to y'all and we like getting your feedback. So what we thought is, you know what, let's just bring forward kind of some of the key concepts and ideas that we're cooking with and what we are starting to kind of roll with as a plan, and let's run it by the planning commission. Let's talk to DRB about some of the design stuff. And then future, there's going to be an all volunteer board meeting again, kind of what we did, just to kind of a sounding board. I kind of see this as how are we doing? Are we on the right track? Is this broadly meet our intent? Are we, if you absolutely hate it, now is the time to tell us. So I'm going to ask y'all, don't get too stuck on the particulars at this point. Note them of the particulars that you want to make sure that we address in the future. But this is the intent of this discussion, is to be more of a, is kind of what we're thinking in the direction we're moving broadly in line with what you had envisioned when we talked about this with you before we got through this process. Is there anything that we're missing that you'd like to see us integrate into our ideas and along those lines? So I'll stop bloviating and let Justin talk. But I just wanted to kind of say that and that we're excited. Thank you.
Good. Great. Thank you for the direction. We'll do our best to comply.
All right, so good evening, everyone. I apologize for my voice. It's a little rough today. I've been under the weather. All right, so for this update, we're going to review many of the key points of the preliminary draft of the South Town Center plan. Starting with the background and guiding principles. So when we started the project, we had 3 main overarching goals. One was to extend and enhance town center by creating a thriving, walkable district that would seamlessly extend existing town center and add new jobs, housing, shops, and public gathering spaces. Our second goal was to support the long-term community and economic vitality by expanding housing choices and employment opportunities while strengthening city's tax base. And the third goal, align growth with infrastructure, mobility, and sustainability. We want to make sure that as we build out the South Town Center, our land use, our transportation, our stormwater systems are all working together in a way that respects the environment and meets the needs of community members. Additionally, in August, we had a volunteer board workshop. Several of you were there, and we got a lot of great feedback from the volunteer boards. And at the end of the meeting, we sort of summed everything up into 4 main priorities. The first was pedestrian flow. We wanted to make sure that the sub area is walkable and safe for pedestrians and has good connections inside and outside of the site. The boards also had priority for community activation spaces. As you know, there are no parks or public gathering spaces in South Town Center. So inclusion of that, and as well as public restrooms, was important. Another highlight was diversity of retail. People wanted a wide variety of businesses to provide an active street life and have, many different retail options. We heard about, wanting to have more restaurants, more retail of all kind, maybe niche grocery stores like Trader Joe's or whatnot. And lastly, nature. There's a big focus placed on preserving the existing green space and making sure that the trail network is well connected. So as we worked with GJLO to develop this preliminary draft, we kept those priorities in mind, and now we're going to go over how they've translated into the draft. So in the draft, we're looking at 3 main alternatives, and these alternatives are outlined in are part of the environmental impact statement. So alternative 1 is the baseline, what exists now. So if we assume the current zoning stays as is, we don't change anything, and it develops over time, that's what alternative 1 would be. And as a note, there are currently 60-foot height limits. Alternative 2 is the higher density alternative that would allow up to 85-foot height limits throughout the sub area, and it also have the highest requirements for commercial uses at the ground floor. Alternative 3 is a mixed density alternative where the heights are intermediate between the current baseline and the higher density option. So it would vary between 60 and 85 feet in the sub area based on which street it's located in, and there would be a lower commercial use requirement. Here is a graph of what that would look like in terms of the land use, the density, how much commercial space and dwelling units would be expected, and some of the urban design. Apologize for any typos on some of these pictures. I pulled them straight from the PDF we got from GGLO, so we wasn't able to fix those.
Can I ask a question?
Oh yeah, sure.
What is the current amount of square footage commercial retail that's in the planning area? Not how we updated it in the zoning, but existing today, like for the Safeway, the pharmacy, all those restaurants there, like this office building, etc. Like, what's that square footage?
That is a great question. I do
have-
not remember off the top of my head. Maybe Jeff knows.
Yeah, let me pull that up. One moment. Buffering.
In the forecast development, you see here, all of these commercial square footages are lower than what exists now. None of the alternatives are requiring ground floor commercial on every lot, only a subset of the lots. It may be as it develops that we end up with more commercial than is shown here. This would be the sort of the minimum expected amount we would get.
Justin, is some of that really just because, I mean, in theory, part of that risk zoning, it's like that, with the supermarket, I mean, technically two supermarkets that, right, that were there.
Mhm.
And they pulled that whole building, there's a pretty large commercial square foot size, right? So I'm assuming that might have to do with what you just mentioned there is smaller or lower overall square footage.
Yeah, one of the biggest changes would be that right now, the current conditions are that there's 1 or 2 story commercial and office on nearly every parcel. But the alternative 1 has no required commercial, and alternative 2 and 3 have some required commercial, but not on every. It's not wouldn't be required for every single lot, the entire ground floor. It's only portions would be required. So if you assume that residential is going to replace commercial on the ground floor and some of the sub area, that's how you end up with the lower commercial footprint.
So to answer the question about square footage, first as a quick note, the baseline 1 alternative, that's as it is right now, that's what the current zoning is right now. And the numbers that are projected here are assuming that we didn't change zoning regulations at all, and then this got built out in 10, 15 years. And then this is what our economists looked at and determined is the most likely scenario for build out for what the market could support in terms of commercial retail. So the current commercial retail area in the town center is it's 581,000 square feet. You do notice, I'm sure you're already noticing that there's a reduction in commercial square footage in all these scenarios. But again, the thing to remember is that some of these square footage reductions is there's some very large box stores. And then you also have a lot of commercial is not all the same thing, right? A commercial space can be a bank. A commercial space can be an eye doctor. It can be a realtor's office. It can also be a restaurant. It could also be a bookstore or a Lego store or a restaurant or a bar, right? So when you have a commercial space, it can be an activity that generates a significant amount of sales tax and retail revenue. And then it can also be an activity that, it's just processing, tax returns that don't necessarily correspond to a strong economic benefit, at least from a revenue perspective. I will say that the analysis of what the fiscal impact is going to be from these different development scenarios is part of our EIS, and that analysis is still in draft form. We're still reviewing that, and we're going to be going into the plus or minuses and the benefits and what the cost benefit sheet is basically when we present the EIS and we publish the EIS, because that was requested during our comment period, and that's part of our analysis for that. However, yes, just to answer your question, 581,000 is the commercial squareage total, but the caveat on that is that includes like 75,000 square feet of medical and 140,000 square feet of office. That also includes 8,000. It looks like there's some other. It might be a hair lower than 581,000 looking at it, because I'm looking at the chart again and it says it includes some other uses like school and other, and so there's like industrial uses like that. So it's probably closer to around maybe 530,000 square foot of commercial.
Can I make a suggestion that we actually do a high retail scenario with housing on top of it? Having done lots of build outs, EIRs like this in my past life, your highest commercial scenario is less than 50% of what exists today. And we're adding, 25% to the population of our city our service needs won't go down, they'll go up.
So we can relay it back to our planner. The reason why that we're reducing the amount of commercial is we're looking at market conditions and we're assessing what is the actual carrying capacity for requiring commercial. Because I think the concern is if you look at maybe some other areas in the city of Mill Creek, I don't want to name names. You have 100%, you have a maybe too strong of a commercial ground floor requirement. And it's making it difficult to make developments pencil on a lot of those parcels because just the commercial environment just isn't there. And so we tried to balance essentially the proposed future commercial use with what the anticipated demand would actually be. But that's great observation.
Because it also thinks the economic conditions can change rapidly.
Yeah.
I think it would be not wise for us to do this much of an effort without having the flexibility to do one that at least preserves, if not expands some of that commercial with the densification that we're planning. Because like I said, you're talking, 5,000 dwelling units, that's going to be over 20% of our population increase if you figure,
Yeah, I agree. That's
and
great feedback.
they still have commercial needs. It's changing what type of commercial needs those are. But, we're underserved in the amount of medical office buildings we have. There's still going to be a grocery store because if you're targeting low income, they're not going to shop at Town and Country for the groceries.
Right.
So it's things like that. A small grocery store is, 40 to 60,000 square feet. That's like the smallest Safeway will build or something. So there's things like that if you take that out of the 233, which is our highest, that's 20% of the commercial gone just to service your grocery store.
This is great input. Happy to relay this back to our consultant and try to see if we can play with those numbers a little bit more. Hopefully, as you'll see in the future presentation, and you can kind of see how we came to those numbers, and you'll see kind of the rationale behind it. Because there was some thought processes into how those numbers came about. But from initial point, great point. Hopefully we can address those concerns.
Because if we're doing this as an EIR, we want it to be able to not have to redo the EIR if conditions change, because we can just change our zoning and other stuff or update in another 5 years our growth management plan. But it'd be useful if we didn't have to redo the environmental impact.
That's a fantastic point. That's why we, do we anticipate actually going up to the 85 feet? I don't know. But that's why we wanted to go higher use than maybe it was typically originally contemplated, just because we wanted to have that flexibility. But you're actually making a good point that we probably should be assessing a higher commercial use just to kind of future-proof us from future complaints. But thank you.
I guess it would also be interesting when you're talking about commercial use. I'm talking about revenue for the city. Only a portion of that commercial use collects sales tax. Offices, doctors' offices, a lot of those don't produce any sales tax revenue for the city. So I guess if that could sort of be looked at of this 581,000 square feet we have today, and now the grocery stores are great big ones and they generate some sales tax, but I think that would be to sort of see, and it's probably in the economic impact, but.
Right. So that's a great point, and that will be part of the EIS analysis.
Okay.
One of the feedbacks, we got some specific feedback from council about things to be studied. And one of the main looks was what would, the loss of sales tax be, and what would the fiscal impact be, and how would that be offset by property tax or other kind of tax financial impacts. And so it's still in draft mode. It's still in a draft form for this analysis, but when we publish the EIS, we'll be publishing the economic impacts and be able to have the net impacts from what is the sales tax potential coming here from shifting from those, as you note, non-productive commercial uses to more economically productive commercial uses.
Yeah. Do you know offhand what the city of Mill Creek is, where a majority of their tax come from? Is it property tax or is it sales tax?
It's primarily property tax.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How much square footage is there in the entire city that is for commercial square feet? Sorry. poorly phrased question. How much commercial square footage is there in the city? How much does this represent currently as a percentage of the city, and how much are these proposed within the city's bounds as they stand today? Because you do mention that there have been some projects in the past that had requirements for certain amounts of commercial that haven't seen the level of rent out, I think, is really the issue. And one of the arguments for greater population is that that would then service more businesses. More businesses would be validated by having more people in the area. But I just think of Mill Creek as holistically instead of just in this precise area.
That's a great question about the total commercial area. I don't know the answer right now. I might have it in one of my previous deliverables. But because I don't want to waste everyone's time, but I can return when I see you in
Yeah,
like 2
absolutely.
weeks, I can return with this information and I can provide you a follow-up with that if that's okay.
Yeah, all of us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think it would be interesting to see the existing town center, how many square feet are in existing town center.
Mhm.
And if we look at the footprint, that's X number of acres. This is Y number of acres. How does the square footage
Right.
compare?
Right. Well, you're always going to see a reduction in commercial. That's inevitable, right? Because if an area is 100% commercial now and it's ground floor single use, and you replace it with a mixture of retail and mixed use and strictly residential, that's always going to inevitably lead to some reduction of commercial square footage. Like that's just part of the redevelopment process, right? But yeah, we're happy to bring forward those comparisons and make sure that we elucidate on that as we
And
dive deeper into the scenarios.
as long as we're on the forecasted development line there, in our comprehensive plan, we indicated there would be so many dwelling units in the South Town Center. Do all of these meet or exceed those numbers we forecasted?
I believe alternatives 2 and 1 would exceed those
Dwelling,
projections.
okay,
Because alternatives 1 is just what was part of the comp plan update,
okay,
assuming a full no commercial limit, just
okay.
Yeah, I got a question as well. When you talk
Turn your
about,
mic on, Jeff.
or it is on, isn't it?
Oh, is it?
Mhm.
Is it on?
Okay.
Justin, can you hear Greg?
We can hear, yeah.
Okay, good.
So my question is, when we have that square footage for the commercial and it's now mixed use and it was previously 1 story and now it's going up and we keep that same footprint as commercial, then that necessarily doesn't mean that the square footage for commercial is going down.
Well, I think again, I don't want to dive. I don't want to dwell too much on this specific slide because as in your slides, you're going to see there's a reason for why we are limiting some commercial areas and allowing residential in some areas. And you'll see there's a reason why that there's some of this reduction that is happening based on some deliberate design choices to encourage the type of development that we'll see.
Okay.
Before we move on, I have a couple quick comments as well. In all 3 of these scenarios, the city we did some preliminary analysis of the financial impact. And when you take into account sales tax and property tax, all 3 of these alternatives would result in either a slight gain of revenue to the city or quite a large gain, up to $1 million a year in revenue. And in alternatives 1 and 3, the baseline and mixed use, estimated sales tax does go down slightly, but it's offset by much higher property taxes from the new dwelling units. Alternative 2, the higher density alternative, actually results in a net sales tax gain. So, even though there's slightly less commercial space by these numbers, the mix is going to change so that you have less Like right now, the existing conditions, there's offices, there's some industrial that don't produce any revenue or don't have any, they don't do sales. So in all the alternatives, it would be a net plus to the city financially.
Essentially, from a fiscal, from a municipal finances perspective, essentially you're swapping your volatile sales tax that you can kind of rely on, but in feast years, it's great. In famine years, it's if you're too reliant on your sales tax, then you have to do a lot of unpleasant things. But when you swap that with a more stable revenue source like property tax and utility tax, then you can have a more stable financial base. That being said, again, part of the EIS process is we'll be presenting the full financial analysis and the financial ramification of the switching this. But as Justin pointed out, based on our initial numbers, what we're finding is that less is more. Again, hopefully in future slides in this presentation, you'll see how that bears out and the math. Before we answer this question, Jose, I'm not sure you were here or some of y'all were in the room. We have a slight snafu with our technology, and our Zoom only lasts for 40 minutes. And we started this presentation about 35 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to end this meeting real quick, and then I'm going to restart the meeting. And Jose, if you can just hop back in, Justin, to you as well, then we can reset the timer and then we can continue this conversation. Apologies for the oversight.
And also for the record, Jeff joined us from his car.
We're getting it. All right.
Just for clarification, am I joining back into this meeting, the meeting notice on the website for the agenda, or am I getting a different meeting notice?
Justin, it should be the same link, right?
Good to hear you, Justin. You're on mute.
It'll be the same link, sorry.
Okay, thanks. All right, I'll hop off and I'll wait another minute or two and then I'll jump back over to that.
And I have my list. There's not even a Jeff on it.
Okay, I think we're all back in. So, Mercedes, you had a question.
So revenue, are we also looking at costs and kind of like the thresholds of costs that increased population will have for the city to like where we net out, and sometimes it might be above and beyond. Maybe that's part of some of the ratios we're looking at, but curious, like as we look at revenue, we're also considering the increased costs and where those thresholds might be more diminished or.
That'll be part of the considerations in the future. Again, the point of this presentation is to talk about the road networks and some of the broader strokes of this and the particulars of the EIS, of the particulars of the alternative baselines and densities and things along those lines. I want to make sure we don't lose the forest for the trees here and to get too drilled in on this aspect. But part of that will be part of the fiscal analysis on all this is looking at potential costs of the different growth scenarios. What we're talking about is between what's already permitted and the highest growth scenario is not a significant jump. It's in the order of like $2,000, it's not like a major 10 grand or 20 grand increment or anything like that. But yeah, that is part of the analysis because again, just to reiterate, what we would like to point out is that this is already rezoned for 5-story, no commercial requirement, multifamily use. It's already zoned for apartments. It's already zoned for high density for 5-story development density. So in terms of that aspect is already kind of there. But what we're really talking about is, do we want to keep it, what part of this EIS discussion that in the future is going to be more, do we want to keep it where we're at now and what GMA and what Commerce authorized us, because when we got our comp plan approved, the way that the city was able to reach its density limits was by dumping all of its density and growth into Southtown Center. And that was how we were able to avoid going into other neighborhoods in the city, in single family neighborhoods, and protecting those. This was kind of our heat sink, as I like to think about it. And so the trick of the master plan then is, if the town center is already destined for large multifamily complexes, then how do we want that to look, and how do we want that to work from a design perspective, and from a traffic perspective, and from an infrastructure perspective, and how do we want that to work from a commercial perspective, right? And so that's kind of the main, hopefully that's the intention of today's conversation, is to be kind of the broad ideas of how can we accommodate between 3,200 and 5,500 additional units.
Can you do a housekeeping thing and click the start my video so that the room will be on the video? Thanks.
There
All right, so next up, we're gonna look at,
Yeah. Did the recording get started again?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the existing framework for how it is now, there's essentially 7 large super blocks with limited intersections. The public realm is defined by large surface parking and significant building setbacks. The roadways are fairly auto-centric with wide travel lanes and limited parking. And there are somewhat disconnected pedestrian facilities and limited crossings. We also think that Mill Creek Boulevard is being used as a cut through between 527 and 164th for traffic. So the proposed framework has some pretty significant changes to the street grid. So the super blocks are broken up into smaller blocks. And then instead of, if you look back this slide, you can see that Mill Creek Boulevard from 527, let me put my mouse here. So essentially, Mill Creek Boulevard extends down through the town center, and Main Street is sort of connects to Mill Creek Boulevard. In this proposal, you now have Mill Creek Boulevard ending where it meets Main Street, then Main Street is essentially continuing all the way down to 9th. So that it extends the Main Street character. There are improvements to the Mill Creek Boulevard intersection. The number of pedestrian intersections is increased from 6 to 18. And the maximum crossing distance for pedestrians is decreased from 900 feet to 350 feet. Additionally, there are traffic calming measures such as
Sorry,
narrowed.
excuse me,
Yes.
question there. Where is it currently 900 feet?
For instance, from 161st up to where Main Street hits, that is about 900 feet here. I think there may be a place to cross. I may have to check. I know 900 feet. Maybe it's the length of 161st. Whatever. I can't remember where it was. We measured it, but 900 feet was the maximum crossing distance you have for pedestrians.
Can you define crossing distance then?
Yeah, so it's the distance you'd have to walk before you have a place you can legally cross as a pedestrian.
So
So-
we have no legal crosswalks between 164th and Main Street, is what you're saying.
That might not have been the exact spot. Let me pull up Google Maps and do some measuring. But I know it may have been a different area. It may be like a 161st between 527 and Mill Creek Boulevard is 900 feet.
Okay.
But basically, the idea is it's much more friendly as a pedestrian if you don't have to walk well outside of your way to go where you want to go. So if you look, if you're somewhere like on one of these huge blocks and you want to go to the other block, you don't have to walk all the way around to where you're going. You just want to go straight. So if you look at this new grid, you can see that there are many more streets, although most of these new streets are where there's existing parking lots. So it's not really removing useful space. It's just converting what are drive aisles into streets, essentially.
Between 164th and 161st, it measures roughly 930 feet.
Okay, so they couldn't cross 527 between those two places, or is it within,
You can't.
or is it on
cross
Mill Creek Boulevard?
If you turn on 164th and you're walking north along Mill Creek Boulevard, there are no pedestrian crossings that entire span, basically, between 164th and 161st.
Okay, thank you. I was just, we're using a term that I wasn't 100% sure what that meant.
Sure.
Which tracks, because it is used as a shortcut reason, right? It's a little speedway.
Yeah.
It implements jaywalking, and unsafe jaywalking is what it
Right.
does.
And if you think about this one of these southern blocks here where the current Safeway is, technically you can walk in that parking lot to get places you want to go, but it's not very enjoyable as a pedestrian to be walking in a parking lot without sidewalks. So once you add those streets with sidewalks in, it now becomes a much better experience for pedestrian to walk around, having those sidewalks everywhere instead of just a parking lot to walk through.
Hey, Justin, so are
Yes.
all of these blue lines streets, new streets, even down in the below 164th? What are these blue
Yeah,
lines?
all the blue lines are going to be new streets, and the thicker lines are thicker blue lines are typically ones that are have more access. The lighter blue ones are typically local access only to access development ahead. So like a local access only for people who live there or shopping at one spot. And we'll go over the street grid and what those streets look like later in the presentation.
But as we look at the blue lines hitting the Bothell Everett Highway, we have, looks like 3 new. Would that mean there's going to be 3 new intersections on the state highway?
No, they would actually end at the highway. They wouldn't connect through except for pedestrians. There are no new proposed accesses to 527. If you
Okay.
look here at this intersection, this is where 161st is. This is an existing connection to the highway. That's you can enter there now. The change for that intersection would be that it would be signalized so that pedestrians could cross the street safely to the rest of the city on the other side. So yeah, no new intersections, but one existing one would be signalized for pedestrian access.
So right turn only for these light blue ones that are below the 161st.
So these ones, so this one here would be, a full access. The other ones do not. Let's make sure
I don't believe they have lights.
Yeah, if there's an existing right turn in, right in, right out, it would stay, but we're not adding any new accesses to the highway.
We're going to work within the existing accesses to 527.
Right, we want to minimize impact of cars turning. That's going to impact the highway throughput and
So-
safety, because minimizing the accesses to the highway also improves safety because those unsignalized intersections cause a lot of crashes.
So these light blue lines, you'd mentioned that these are pedestrianized. They're going to have sidewalks on both sides of the road?
We're requiring sidewalks on both sides of all the new streets. And some of them are pedestrianized, some aren't. We'll get to that. We've got a slide on they'll show which streets in particular.
I was like heavy asterisks on pedestrianized because
Yeah.
there's some cool design things that we're proposing.
Yeah, so in addition to traffic calming, we are would be adding a new continuous protected bike lanes on 2 of the streets, Mill Creek Boulevard and Main Street. A new central park, a new smaller park, and new trail connections to North Creek Trail.
Just to gravitate a little bit on the North Creek Trail connections. One of the reasons why, and you'll see some of the decisions that we're making on this, that we're continuously trying to connect to the Creek Trail and try to connect, is we're trying to pivot the city to think about that trail as an economic development engine for us. It's such a beautiful asset, and what we found during all of our community outreach, during all of our volunteer board meetings, one of the things that we kept hearing is, don't you dare touch that trail. And how can we make that trail even more special than it is? And so a lot of the main concepts of what we're doing is, how can we try to bring the trail into this kind of downtown experience, and how can we try to connect to it, and how do we bring that forest feel into the city? So that's kind of maybe the big abstract idea, but sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so as you can see, the landscape and open space has some pretty exciting stuff, at least I think. Number 1, there's going to be a new central park in the heart of the sub area. Up above the north part, number 3, there is a new gateway park that would provide a seamless transition for pedestrians between Mill Creek Boulevard and North Creek Trail. And then number 2, converting the existing pond, which doesn't actually work very well for stormwater, into what we're calling a sponge park. We'll get into what that means a little later. And then new and improved trail connections. So the design principles for these open spaces and parks are shown here. Important things are they be welcome and opening, accessible, use native plants where possible, have varied scales of gathering places, have a flexibility of uses, and seasonal interest. So there's something useful all year round. So we're going to go through an up close look at what these new parks could look like. So here's the North Gateway Park. Just to reiterate, it's this section here where Mill Creek Boulevard would hit Main Street. So you can see it's a sort of a small, narrow park, and it would have trail connections, a cycle track, and what's kind of cool is that when you're coming down Mill Creek Boulevard from, say, up in the rest of the city, you come down Mill Creek Boulevard, you enter the sub area, and you can get a view of North Creek Trail and the green belts through that park. So it's kind of a cool view shed that we are planning on here.
So
Next up is, yes.
Are the blocks there existing buildings?
Those will be what these are proposed footprints that could happen with the new.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not existing.
Okay.
Next up, the most important one is the Central Park. So this would be located roughly where the I think it used to be Rite Aid. It's now a CVS, I think, just north of the Safeway is. And it's pretty cool. It's surrounded on 3 sides by retail frontage. So you can imagine shops and restaurants. And on the west side, you have the Sponge Park and North Creek Trail. All around the park, there is the streets are designed to be pedestrian friendly, level crossings, and on the north side of the park, there's no street, so it's the pedestrian path and the park actually connect directly into the retail area. We're anticipating things like a new playground, new green space for throwing around frisbees or other large gatherings, as well as just a whole slew of things we think are really cool. You can see that 161st would connect directly to Main Street and North Street Trail through this pedestrian path through the park.
And I remember talking a bit about in the planning brainstorm, public restrooms. Is that part of this park?
It can absolutely be part of it. One of the things, you see that little pavilion stage in the middle?
Mm-hmm.
We kind of saw that as, that could be like a little bandstand. There could be bathrooms there.
Okay.
The programming on this stage is, not defined. But the whole idea is that Mill Creek needs we need like a true central, a true heart. A place to have a dedicated park space, dedicated festival grounds that we can keep coming back to year round. In the summer, it could be movies in the park. In the winter, you might be able to have a skating rink in there. There could be just whatever we need to do year round. We can just kind of have some kind of thing there. But the important thing here is that, if you see in red, that's high quality retail. That would be retail, and then we would likely explore policies that like dictate what kind of commercial it could go in, so it's not, it's going to be like restaurants and Lego stores and stuff like that, and not maybe something that's not going to be super exciting for pedestrians to kind of hang out around. But the idea is that, and the opposite of this is the sponge park, which Justin will go into, but the idea is that we want to have to have the park and kind of open natural space come into kind of this bowl of retail and commercial and activity. And so you're really fusing the natural, beautiful area of the North Creek with the actual city's heart.
And then
Yeah,
just
Mhm.
is the definition of a play area that would be a structured play structures type of thing?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
And this is more of and this is, to be clear, to be sure, this is a more of a conceptual idea what the park will be laid out as. The actual dimensions and composition could change. We would of course be relying on the parks board, for instance, when we help design, when we actually design this. So it's just, conceptual what it could be. It's not saying there will be the path exactly in this location or this, this play areas right here. These are sort of the things we're looking at, we would want to see. There would be for sure a pedestrian crossing though, coming 161st to the Sponge Park. Speaking of the Sponge Park, this is where the existing pond is. As I mentioned earlier, the existing pond, it's an older stormwater facility that's not really working well. I've talked to our city engineer saying it's not really doing much for water quality at all. So the Sponge Park is essentially going to be a combined facility that during high rainfall events will flood, but during dry weather, it can be used for recreation. So you can imagine, walking around during the winter when it's wet, it'll be wet there. But during summer, when there is no rain, this can be used for a number of activities that people will want to use there. So a big part of the plan is creating a regional stormwater facility. And the reasons why is because it would help manage runoff at a district scale rather than a parcel by parcel basis. Instead of every parcel having their own little facility, we can put it all in one big facility, which is easier to manage. It would support environmental performance and urban development objectives by consolidating detention, treatment, and infiltration functions. And it would improve overall water quality, reduce peak flows to downstream systems, and enhance long-term water resilience. Right now, a lot of the stormwater is just going directly to the creek with no detention. So we really want to have a good modern facility to manage those stormwater flows. You can see on this map here, the dark blue is the Central Park. And below the Central Park, there would be a stormwater detention facility, a vault. And then the Sponge Park would also have below ground vaults, but would be designed so it could flood. The actual park would flood during high storm events. You can see here we have some diagrams what that could look like. So this here we have the Central Park and the stormwater, the sponge park. If you look, you have a vault underneath the Central Park, and the sponge park would have shallow chambers underneath. And what that would look like during different weather patterns. This diagram here, the green part is where the sponge park is. So you see underneath the sponge park, you have these detention facilities. And when water flows are low in dry seasons, the water would flow through this underground area and then eventually out to the creek. But during high storm events, you would end up having water water would collect in the basin of the sponge park before eventually draining out. So it provides water storage during these during rain events. You can see it would be designed so that during large storms, maybe like a 25-year storm, it would completely fill with water.
So Justin, has the 25-year storm stuff been updated for climate adaptations? And like, how does this compare to some of the more recent years where we've had large storming events that'd be closer to the 100-year flood mark?
Great question. I don't know the answer to that one. I'm sure when they're designing the size of the underground detention facilities, they would be taking that into account. I don't know specifically how.
Yeah, that's certainly a great question. We'll relay back to our city engineer and have them review, and I can report back to you next time we talk to you about what they have to say about
If
that.
we're designing new, we want to design for the future.
Correct.
And the future is changing.
Yeah, very quickly.
100-year storm every 5 years.
Yeah.
Sort of apt.
Yeah. So next up, here's the street types you'll be able to find in the sub area. So if we go through the dark red line, that's our commercial Main Street. So we want to extend that, that character of Main Street all the way through the sub area. It would have, right now there's some parking in a couple areas, but for the most part, there's no parking and no bike lanes, and in some areas, there's no sidewalks. So in the update, you would have a two-way protected bicycle track on the west side, parallel parking, and of course, and sidewalks, and they're wide so they can accommodate commercial frontages. Then Mill Creek Boulevard, would connect 527 to Main Street. It would also have a two-way protected bicycle track. Then these dark blue lines are secondary building access streets, which would be available for, vehicles to access local buildings. Then you have this dark orange color that's around the Central Park. These would be pedestrian-oriented curbless streets with parallel parking. And then we have some these light blue would be the neighborhood access streets that have residential parking on one side and residential frontages on the other sides. The dotted lines are private access drives. These are primarily for accessing parking garages or for fire access to the buildings in those areas. And then there's a couple areas, these dotted green lines. You can see here from 164th north and then through the parks, and then also in this upper section here connecting this new street to Mill Creek Boulevard. Those are pedestrian only paths, and although they also provide fire access. So they'll most likely be pedestrian only streets that have bollards, retractable bollards at each end to allow fire access in case of emergency.
Justin,
All
you've
right.
mentioned parallel parking, or
Mhm.
are there any other kind of earmarked parking lots?
So that will be up to, this is just for the in the right of way on the public streets. Developers could add additional parking. We expect, we're probably going to require, most likely, that most of the additional parking be structured. So in either above ground or underground parking garages. Although there may be a place for limited surface parking as well. Those standards will be set in the zoning and design standards. Yeah, we expect a lot more parking to be installed. It's just gonna be structured rather than surface parking lots.
The parking's gonna be interesting, also because a lot of the town center is also within the footprint of a bus rapid transit area. And so there are also some state requirements about limiting our ability to impose too strict of parking standards in some of those areas. So just, but parking is definitely gonna be something I imagine is gonna be continuously re-evaluated and discussed as this project goes forward.
5,500 more people, more dwelling units, and at least half as much commercial square footage as there is now. I would imagine there's still going to need a good amount of parking.
Yeah, even if you, in the ironic thing about parking is what the development scene is seeing, that even when you reduce parking requirements, a lot of times that's not actually corresponding to actually less big parking being created, just because of the way that development finance works, and that most, like a lot of, like what I found in California, for example, a lot of housing is being built, and even though there is even though they had favorable parking minimums, the banks were still not approving any financing because they're like, well, it's still underparked. Like we're not going to bounce that. But that being said, parking is going to be a major consideration in this. It's probably going to have to be some kind of structured parking, and that'll certainly be part of this.
Justin, could we back up to the detention facility again, just for a second? We have these large central detention facilities. Would those be built by a developer? Would they be funded by the city? And maybe that's getting way too far down into the detail, but just something maybe we could address in the future.
Yeah, so the tentative plan is for when this kicks off, it's most likely the city that's gonna build this. And then whenever a development happens, they need to reimburse the city for their share of the detention facility.
Okay.
I'm forgetting the term for that. It's like there's a word for, I can't remember. Basically, yeah, with the city would be building it, but getting reimbursed by developers for their share of the stormwater.
I think it's a latecomers agreement.
Yes, exactly.
Also, we're also exploring grant opportunities and things like that, because obviously this is one of the big expensive parts of this. This initiative is doing this big thing, but if we can get the major stormwater infrastructure in place, then that should also significantly incentivize development.
Yeah.
And one benefit of combining the park space with the stormwater detention facilities is that you have a lot of you're not wasting space on having it separated. So the combined use means you can build at the same time for cheaper than doing them separately. And for the parks, we're exploring how we can get those paid for. There's some options, including we have existing park impact fees. We may offer in lieu fees from developers for providing better amenities. We may change our impact fees to collect more revenue to build this park. Yeah, the exact finances of it all, we're still working on.
At this early stage of the draft, it's still a lot of the policy prescriptions are still kind of being developed, but we figure let's build the dream and then figure out how to do the dream.
Exactly. Yeah, we're making sure we know where everything's going, and then once we know that looks good, we can find out how to pay for it. So here's the proposed bike and pedestrian priority routes. You can see we have bike access along Main Street and Mill Creek Boulevard on protected bike lanes. We also have some dedicated pedestrian facilities, both in the parks and in some of the areas not in the parks. And again, along the Central Park, we'd have the curbless, pedestrian-oriented streets.
I have a question on here and a suggestion.
Mhm.
So North Creek Trail is a, dedicated regional bike trail and has, plans to connect it further. And right now, the part where it kind of dead ends at that new sponge park, it doesn't do anything, and we don't have a good crossing across 164th, where we're now going to be putting more people that would likely want to go migrating between the two places, that we consider a better extension of North Creek Trail to actually cross 164th properly, maybe like a bike pedestrian bridge, continue its alignment such that it does actually connect to outside of our city's jurisdiction. Since we plan to redevelop, let's plan for the actual proper connection of this trail. There is lots of funding plans you can go after for Fleet Street bike trails type stuff, but if we're doing this, it looks short-sighted of us to not include a better actual fixing this alignment that's a gap in the North Creek Trail currently. And
Yeah,
then
we
on that suggestion, I would look at the feasibility of doing the Mill Creek Boulevard, not to necessarily have that set off bike lanes, and be able to move instead of parallel parking to diagonal parking, especially if we want to do recreational events or big city events around the park. While we hope that there's going to be parking structures, you'd also have a lot of people coming in that don't know where the parking structures exist. And that would make it more feasible to do there. Because if I'm a bicyclist and I'm actually bicycling around as my thing, I'm going to go on the Class 4 North Creek Trail if we actually fix the problems with the North Creek Trail, where it's dangerous right now because of the number of tree roots that need to be addressed. But if we actually invest in that, and if we want to make it a regional thing where people want to come off, I don't think we necessarily need to have parallel to it, less than a block away, that high of a class bike road when we're giving up a lot for that space. I think it's appropriate that the cross connections through this section to get to North Creek Trail are great enhancements, but I don't agree with us looking at such a expensive bike enhancement along Mill Creek Boulevard when we have the North Creek Trail right there. Let's fix North Creek Trail and let's draw people off North Creek Trail, but that's also going to be putting in bike infrastructure. In our current town center, if you want to ride your bike and go off and eat there, you can stand in the middle of Trunk Creek Center, you can't sing a single bike rack. That's our problem, why we don't have more bikers coming to our town. North Creek Trail needs fixing, and we also need to have the amenities to cater to them when they do show up.
That's great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to skip ahead real fast to, or is it B? Here's the proposed section for, let me go back to the first slide. So if you look here, this connection you talked about where North Creek Trail would hits Main Street. We have a street section there where we were actually expanding the sidewalk to a high, like a higher width, so that, and then all along from that connection all the way down to 164th and then south on 9th to the trail, we're gonna have an extra wide sidewalk, so that it's not a perfect trail replacement, but it's similar to what was done on the Burt Gilman in Ballard, where it moves on to this an extra wide sidewalk briefly before it continues on to the dedicated pedestrian trail. All right, so here are the pro street frontages in terms of where commercial would be required. This dark, or this red priority commercial retail frontage would be where, in the alternative 3, the mixed density, where commercial would be required on the ground floor. And then the purple would be in the alternative 2, the higher density alternative, where additional commercial would also be required. And you can see it's focused along Main Street, this really which is conceived as the primary commercial corridor along Main Street here, with a secondary corridor around the Central Park, and then in the high density, a little bit along Milk Creek Boulevard and along 164th.
And I would like to point out too, that what we're not saying is that commercial is not allowed on the yellow areas. We're just saying that the only place that's purple or red would be places where we have a requirement that you could only have ground floor commercial. So if the commercial market does provide, right, and you are able to put ground floor commercial elsewhere, terrific. But just in our experience knowing developers, they're going to want to only do residential, and that's the first thing they're going to ask to do. And so we just want to make sure that we're being deliberate on where we're going to allow ground floor residential and where we don't want to allow ground floor residential. And the difference between red and purple is based on the level of density of units that you put around it that can support them. The more height you add, the more units you add, the more likely those purple kind of commercial frontages are viable. But at a minimum, the red is kind of, that's, as Justin remarked, that represents our option 3 for the.
Exactly.
Sorry, quick interruption. I see we're about to run out of time here on this
Yeah,
Zoom.
1 minute.
Yep.
We'll all need to drop off and rejoin in a minute.
Let me reset.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so it's just pointed out, ground floor commercial is allowed and encouraged throughout all the sub area, but tentatively it would only be a requirement on these priority retail areas.
And again, I think, just to kind of reiterate, the whole idea is that what we want to do is maintain this Main Street USA kind of feel and make sure that we have a cohesive downtown character that's full of restaurants and shops and stuff like that. And that's why we see, kind of going back to our earlier discussion about the loss of commercial area. And in this instance, this is perhaps an example of less is more, where by actually reducing the commercial space, you can actually increase commercial sales revenue, tax revenue, by having higher quality and more focused uses along a specific corridor that has the correct design considerations of walkability and other pedestrian and bicyclist amenities. But sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Yeah. So next I'm gonna go through some of the street sections. So we're gonna start here on Main Street. You can see that in this street section, we have parallel parking on each side. We have 6-foot planting strips, wide 10-foot sidewalks, and then I mentioned parallel parking on each side, yeah, and then a 10-foot two-way cycle track. There's another alternative where instead of a two-way cycle track, we could also do bike lanes on either side.
I guess from my standpoint, I sort of like the double, keeping all the bikes on one side of the street, not splitting it like that last picture you showed.
Yeah, and the benefit of that is that this cycle track would continue all the way from the top of the sub area all the way down to where it meets North Creek Trail on 9th. So you could have you don't have to cross the side of the road when you're biking along the trail, which is nice.
Yeah.
The only downside is that the two-way cycle tracks, if drivers aren't used to them, are sometimes not. There can be some safety issues where cars turning across the cycle track may not be aware of a cyclist coming from what is, the wrong direction. They're not expecting someone. But I think overall, this is our preference to be the two-way on the one side.
I think I'm going to echo what's our title? Committee member, whatever we are.
Commissioner
Schulte said about we ought to have that bike path over on the North Creek Trail. I think that would help avoid those issues with traffic.
Yeah, I mean that's 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 a possibility. The potential downside of that is that people who are actually wanting to use these businesses then don't have a safe way to travel along Main Street when they're visiting these places.
Because of bike theft, that's not gonna happen. I'm gonna park my bike in a very safe place, and when you're in that dense of an area, you're probably gonna walk it anyways. If you actually want to shop, because you're gonna carry your bike with you, unless we have protected, watched parking lots. In my experience, these things don't get used that way. It'll be covered with people with strollers, and the bicyclists will get upset. Like I said, I think we have a really good bike line that will be used with the North Creek Trail, and this is not the most effective use of the space because it's too much duplicity, and I don't think it'll be used to much extent at all. A biker that wants to visit these things is going to get off and walk their
I do have
bike.
a clarification question about that. So, it's an interesting idea we're saying about moving the bicycle traffic to the North Creek Trail. But the question is that going to create an issue for the people like the senior citizens who use it as a walking path and like, I let my kids.
That's again,
walk and
enhancement of
stuff.
the North Creek Trail. Consider widening it so you have a dedicated 2-lane biking area with a separate walking path area. What's very economical, a lot of places are doing that stamped kind of sonic pressed stuff, so it's more permeable than the asphalt, and that's for the walkers.
So to be sure, your recommendation then is to expand the capacity of the current North Creek Trail to accommodate both bicyclists and pedestrians.
Yep, and if we package this in, this can be rolled into those development fees to help pay for that enhancements to the North Creek Trail.
Yeah, and with strategic parking for your bike and then these entry points onto Main Street, you've got your biking access that you're looking for, but also freeing up some of the pedestrian space so that it's not convoluted with bicycle traffic.
Like, I'd say this is great if we were a town that didn't have that thing 1 block away, but we have that thing the North Creek Trail 1 block away. Let's make that into the better trail. And we can more use, because parking is still going to be an issue here, I believe, especially if you want to use these parks for community gatherings. Parallel parking is less desired. A lot of people can't do it.
And to your point, I think from an economic development standpoint, if their central thesis on this whole thing is to create an urban environment that says connected to the North Creek system as much as possible, then it would make sense then to try to draw people onto the trail and off the trail as much as possible so that the relationship between the trail and the commercial area is symbiotic.
It's symbiotic, but I think we're just duplicating the effort by spending a lot of money to build this cycle track along Mill Creek Boulevard instead of putting that money into enhancing North Creek Trail and then using this to change it from parallel parking to diagonal parking.
Great thoughts. I'm excited to bring that back to KPFF.
So almost an entirely different thing. I don't know how comfortable I am with driving Main Street right through the intersection of two parks. It seems like a place that you'd want to have people running across, walking across, biking across, but then we're going to have the main thoroughfare through the area through there. I assume it's something like 20 to 25 miles an hour.
I think that's a great thought. We debated this on calls actually about, do you route them around the park and a loop or something like that? But the consideration was, then if you're routing more traffic around the loop, then you're going to be drawing more cars. You're going to be putting more cars between the park and the retail and stuff. And we want to try to create an environment around the park in that commercial area that's as permissive as possible for people to cross between the retail area, restaurants, and park for that transition to be kind of seamless between them. So the idea is, where do you put the traffic, right?
Right.
One of the ideas was maybe we put traffic calming and we try to slow down traffic as much as possible on Mill Creek, on this Main Street area. So that
right.
wouldn't be, yeah.
One thing that I see, there's a lot of meander to Main Street through here because that does slow traffic down. Your longest straight track is through the park. So that is where you're going to have your rip roar right through there. And you're going to have people rev their engines because they like to hear fart pipes go right in the middle of your
Yeah.
peaceful little park.
Oh, my goodness.
I think a good mitigation though can be done with the all-way crosswalks and like the lighted crosswalks, more the traffic calming stuff that could easily be done in here. And if people know that it is like an all-way crosswalk, that will prevent the amount of times they get disrupted. And then, you know, if you have the total flashing round, like that whole street, you could put flashers on when it's all way. I mean, there's things like that that I've seen fairly urban settings do things like that pretty effectively with pedestrians.
And we're also hoping that because, you know, if the lead up to that park on both sides is going to be commercial retail and active pedestrian stuff. So,
The hope is they will slow down naturally.
Yeah.
I think what we're also talking about is a lot of additional work that we put into traffic calming that will increase the cost of just this one block to make sure that we have a straight line of cars through this park. So I'm not sure that I think that's the most effective use here.
it's a good thought. That's another thing I'm happy to relay back to KPFF and see if our civil engineers see if we can, you know, think through that. It might be the lesser of two evils. I don't know. I think that's kind of the big challenge, I think, with the site, but those are good thoughts or if we do that route, to kind of what, Commissioner Schulte was saying is that, you know, we'll have to make sure there's a robust street design that includes traffic calming and measures and stuff. And maybe that could be maybe there's like a SEPTED like element to this, right? Where that's just integrated into the design, like the way that we do our medians and stuff like that. So certainly good thoughts though.
Yeah, and the curves you see on Main Street here, these are existing curves. They follow how Mill Creek Boulevard currently is laid out. But in this section between the Sponge Park and the main park, yeah, pedestrian safety is a huge consideration. We could have things like chicanes. We're planning on having raised intersections. So you have sort of a natural, not kind of a speed cushion there where people would cross when they're passed by the park. But yeah, definitely traffic calming is going to be very vital in that section. All right, so next, the street section between the park and the Sponge Park, you can see that the sidewalk has grown. The sidewalk is wider here to account for people walking along North Creek Trail and along the park. But again, similar to above where there's the parallel parking and the cycle track. South of the park, this is envisioned as a pedestrian-friendly street where you have it's a curbless street with wide sidewalks and parallel parking. On the other side of the street, we actually did have some angle parking to provide more parking for people who are wanting to visit that central space. I know, Commissioner Schulte, you had asked about angle parking. So there is some included. There's just not a lot. It's really only around the park area, but we could look into having more in those spaces. On the north side of the park, it would actually completely pedestrianized. The street would be pedestrian only, except for emergency access, which is kind of cool because you can use that pedestrian promenade to hold things like farmers markets or street fairs, anything that would provide a great experience for people who use the park and the surrounding areas. Now down here's an example of one of those neighborhood type streets where you have the sidewalks are slightly narrower because we're expecting these to have more residential instead of commercial uses, but they also have parallel parking. And then up to the north, along Mill Creek Boulevard, connecting 527 to Main Street. You have the two-way cycle track and parallel parking on this section. But then moving closer to 527, the parallel parking is removed in favor of more travel lanes for turn lanes for accessing the highway.
I got a question.
Yep.
And it goes back to this, these bike lanes and, we talk about sidewalks. Is it going to be that bikes are restricted off of sidewalks?
They may be. In town, in existing town center to the north, bikes are restricted from the sidewalks. We could do the same thing for this sub area. It sort of depends on the bike infrastructure we get in place.
Yeah, and I know,
Mhm.
sorry to interrupt, but other towns are doing test programs with like Lime and scooters and that type of thing where they can rent them and that helps reduce the carbon footprint. Is there any thought that's been put into this as well?
Last mile transit is always something interesting. I don't think, Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, but we haven't integrated too much of that thought process into here so far. I think we're just trying to focus on the nuts and bolts, or correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, you were more into the.
We haven't done a lot of talk with GGLO about it. I have done some thinking about it. If you look at the street sections, there's pretty wide sidewalk areas and planting strips, and that's to accommodate stuff such as trees and bike parking or like scooter parking, so that we would have space to do that off street if we wanted to. And then any bicycle infrastructure we include could be used by scooters. It's hard though, because there aren't any Lime or Bird programs in Mill Creek currently, and it's hard to know when the tipping point for when it makes sense financially for them to move to an area like this would be.
I think
Personally, it'd be great if we had them. We haven't had any interest from those companies
I think there's also a
thus
couple
far.
about. One is, the way that the roads are being designed, could it accommodate, or the way that this system is being designed, could it accommodate these programs? Absolutely. Is it something that we're necessarily worried about right now? Not necessarily, because one, that's going to be a huge discussion that is more complex than anything else, because there's a lot of strong feelings in the community. A lot of people love Lime scooters. A lot of people hate Lime scooters. And they are the scourge of the earth for a lot of folks too. And I think that that's going to have to be that will be a very interesting conversation that's going to take a long time to resolve, especially as it relates to, council support, and then we do the public outreach. And so I think the best way to do this would be to, if we design our system to be pedestrian friendly, having these cycle paths and tracks and stuff like that, you're essentially designing the infrastructure to where if we ever get to those last mile transportation systems, sure, it works. It could work there functionally, but we don't necessarily have to answer the sticky question of how should we interact with those types of programs? Because I think that conversation itself is deceptively, it seems like oh yeah, let's just design it. Let's throw in some last mile programs. But once you kind of once you start working through how these operate and how the community interacts with it, it becomes a very complicated question that I think that, that piece is, it's going to require a much larger conversation.
Yeah, and I bring this up because we're talking about as we go in the future. I understand we don't have that incentive, or those programs don't exist. But thinking back to last summer and the number of electric bicycles and the just seeing the demographics of the people that were using it. And, to me, that was a safety issue between them, other drivers. We're talking about, from what I'm seeing, is a very family-friendly infrastructure for this, area. And we just want to make sure that everybody is safe and
Absolutely.
minimize.
I think that's the advantage of stuff like cycle tracks too, is that it's a good place to have some of those types of systems and bicyclists and have them separated from I'm a parent with young kids, right? I am that person with a stroller that annoys the bicyclists, and I hate annoying bicyclists because I am the guy with the stroller and I have nowhere else to stroll my kids. And so that I am sensitive to what you're saying, and I think that's a very poignant point. And I think it's also something to note that as we kind of look at these cross street sections, to really be intentional about making sure that whatever we decide is future proof. So if we ever elect to cross that road, we can.
Yeah, so the more bicycle infrastructure we add, easier it'll be to integrate those scooter programs. I forgot if I mentioned earlier, our current city code currently has allows us to restrict skateboards, bicycles, scooters from sidewalks, and we do that in town center. And again, we could do that here as well. For instance, in this street section I'm showing, since there's a cycle track, it'd be very easy to say, no scooters, no bikes on the sidewalk. You use the cycle track and keep the sidewalk safe for pedestrians.
Yeah,
Right.
I saw that advantage, and I like that aspect of it. It's just, I just don't want to say or see that it's like, oh, well, we built this and then the trail doesn't, it's like, well, we put all our money there. We can't revitalize that trail. We got to make sure that it's, if we're going to do both, we do both.
Great thoughts.
Other good point. One potential wrinkle could be that when development happens, we are able to require developers to build to construct the frontage in front of their parcel. So like if you build a new development, let's see, it's one where there's actually, yeah. So like if you were gonna build up here in this block, you build this building, we could require them to build out the street to meet these standards. I'm not sure if we can do that to the trail. I would have to look that up. It's a possibility, but we can require developers to build that cycle track, to build that parking in, widen the sidewalk. That's a tool or a lever we can use to get these streets completed.
Another thing that's maybe unrelated but kind of related is we are slated to be doing a Parks Recreation open space plan either this year or next year. And the pros plan is absolutely the kind of place where we can identify big investments and strategies for improving park spaces and trail connectivities and stuff like that. I'm not saying I don't want to include a big North Creek glow up as not as part of this master plan, because again, I think what you're saying, Commissioner Schulte, is spot on about appropriately improving that trail system. But there is also additional opportunities. Like this isn't the only exit. This isn't the last exit out of town to address some of the trail and connectivity issues. But again, these are all really good ideas, and I think anyways, I'll let Justin continue, then we can wrap up. I can opine.
I don't know much more. I was going to say the next steps. The next big place to get input is going to be our volunteer board workshop on the 28th. So for those who are here at the last volunteer board workshop, we're going to be taking, we're going to look at the plan as the draft plan, and then, breaking the groups and reviewing how the draft plan meets the goals that the first workshop presented. You're all welcome to attend, even if you weren't the first one. And we encourage everyone to attend. The more attendance, the better. All right, with that,
Is that going to be a similar format to the last one where we had multiple groups that were represented?
Yeah, that's the idea, is that we'll have Parks and Rec, we'll have Youth Advisory Board, we'll have Arts and Beautification, we'll have Design Review Board, and then we'll have y'all, and then we'll all come together, and then we'll want to break them up so that we have Design Review Board people working next to y'all, next to Youth Advisory Board. We thought that the way that the workshop went last time was really cool, in the way that we had some really interesting thoughts and conversations, and how everyone kind of more or less came to the same conclusion about stuff. And we just want to kind of replicate that process again. And we thought it worked well. If you hated it, let us know. But I thought the crosstalk was really promising, and I think it was really productive to do that, to do it in that format.
I just have one comment on one of the other things that was in this plan about the public bathrooms that people wanted. I'd be very intentional about how you want to design that, such that they're controlled bathrooms. We are on a rapid transit line. Homelessness is increasing. And from my experiences, if they are not more inside of a building or institution, or that it's monitored and has hours of use, that they will degrade rapidly and not be something that people will want to enter. Something like you have some of these bigger buildings that have corridors, but you could have a public bathroom through one of those areas that the city pays the building management to maintain. It's monitored, cleaned. Just having open bathrooms off of BRT line is usually not a good thing for the crime and safety of our communities.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of, just kind of building up what you said, I've seen a lot of, to me, it seems like some of the best public bathrooms that I've seen usually are ones that it was part of the development agreement that when that was approved, that they had to set aside certain amounts to do that. Or I've also seen that for providing facilities for bus drivers, for when bus drivers have to take scheduled rest stops, and creating a small facility for transit users, for transit drivers and stuff like that too. But great thought. Well, this is the final slide. Are there any other additional thoughts? Are we totally off base? Are we more or less kind of on track with what we had kind of envisioned? Just like I said, I think I just like to kind of really fin this off with just what are your general thoughts and general feedbacks we'd like to kind of bring here? Is there anything we need to absolutely rethink? Maybe that's a better first starting question. Is there anything you guys just absolutely hate?
So, okay, it looks like we swung for the parks with what, for the fences with what you're putting here. It seems like this is very ambitious and very much what we would like to see. Is there a vision for what it would look like if you couldn't get all of this? I'm thinking of this because I think there is still a road which is not connected over at the farm, and that development is quite old. I'm thinking of this because I don't believe every road in Mill Creek has sidewalks on both sides. I know that that's an improvement we're still trying to do everywhere in the city. So I'd like to see what it would look like if it wasn't absolutely everything we want, but maybe some of the things we think we can get, and like where we would have priorities, I think would be good. Prioritize what you really do want to have, so that that can help us to understand what's our minimum viable product, essentially, compared to what is the if I got everything I wanted kind of version.
Well, I
Great
think
comment. And I was going to say that it's likely that it won't all be done at once. If we look at where's that slide? The street grid, for instance. What's that?
That's exactly why I want to, when we're looking at a vision, what we're selling is something that is at least 20 years off, really. And that's why I mentioned, okay, there's a road that isn't connected, but that's only 10 years old. So, but that's one I really thought would have happened by now if it was going to happen. It's been an ongoing issue for a decade. So and continuing the adding the sidewalks on both sides of the street all throughout the city. So that's why I want to know, okay, what is our priority in, because this looks a lot like, this is our part. Things like the roads is us. That's not developers. Even if we end up imposing some, what did you say the fee was called? Where it's a come lately,
Oh,
Latecomer agreement.
latecomers agreement kind of thing. So there's a lot there.
I think one of the most difficult parts is going to be the park, because it's going to be expensive. The streets, I think, are a little easier. Like all of these new light blue connections, those and these green ones too. These will all happen when those areas are redeveloped. So right now it's, parking lot, 1 or 2 story building. If someone redevelops, one of the conditions of developing is they have to finish the street in their development. If they're on both sides of the street. If they're on one side of the street, they finish half the street. So these smaller roads, I think, are fine. They may take a while to be completed because you have to wait for the development to happen. When the development happens, they'll be required to build the street, required to build the sidewalks. It'll get done when it redevelops. The question is how long it takes to redevelop.
How long it takes to redevelopment is equal parts third-party interest, it's equal parts luck, and equal parts our own interest, right? It's how we set our development incentives. It's how we array ourselves to be receptive to development, what conditions we put on the zoning. I think this is going back to the commercial requirement conversation, right? The more restrictive and more restrictions you put on what's allowed as a land use, the more difficult it is for projects to pencil. And because we're not in the business of doing land development ourselves, right? If a project can't pencil and rely on developers to do it, then you're not going to see the development. And I think that's what we're seeing, for example, on that road, right? There's a lot of issues, that reason why that road never connected through. And part of it's because the conditions on the ground for the zoning make it maybe a little difficult for those projects to pencil that are required to trigger needing to build out the rest of that spine.
And this might be getting really augured in on something, but if we have a road that is only half built by the side that had half of it, and it's for pedestrians, what do we do when it snows? Who plows that? Is it our road? Is it their road? Do they do it with shovels? Do they need to plow it? Do they need to sweep it? I don't know. And if it's for pedestrians, I want it safe for us to walk on.
It's a great question. I'll be happy to have Justin look into it.
So I guess from my standpoint, several of us took part in the August workshop. And I think we've come a really long way in 4 months. And from what I heard of the commissioners tonight, I didn't hear any line stopping issues. You're headed basically the right direction. So thank you.
Yeah, I just have a remaining kind of wonder, what do we do now with North Town Center? Is it like the leftover, or, I mean, would be drastic improvements to what's in North Town Center.
Well, it's a lot like walking. You put your left in front of you, then you do the right, then you do the left, then you do the right. We built Woodside Walk, and that created the density for the North Town Center. You build North Town Center, then that developed. Then now we're doing the South Town Center, we're doing the master plan. That'll develop and that'll build out. Also, the DRCC plays a lot into this. For example, council in the part of the resolution said that they would explore moving City Hall to the DRCC. By doing so, that means that where we're sitting now becomes a prime piece of real estate that can catalyze development. And so you might be able to get the first dominoes to fall more quickly than we thought, because we own this land, right? We can just go out to market whenever we want with it, theoretically. So I think that what happens in North Creek Trail is a great question. And the answer to that question is a little bit dependent on what goes on at the DRCC and how we develop that, because everything here is connected essentially as one cohesive place, right? And so with the North Creek Trail, we can take whatever successes that we have here, things that are really
I
popular.
mean, North Town Center.
Yeah, North Town Center, sorry. We can take whatever policies, development incentives that were localized to South Town Center, we can just click and drag and expand it up in the North Town Center as well. we could do this could be launched to another sub area, not master plan, but a refresh. It could do that. Or, right now, town center, north and south, from a zoning perspective, there is no distinction, right? The same regulations that apply in South Town Center now also apply up there. So, as this area develops and we get more housing and more family out there, that's also going to increase foot traffic and shoppers for places up here. So you could see a change in the way the market operates up here. It's hard to say right now, but to answer your question though, is that, it's not that it won't be forgotten. I think a lot of ways it's going to be improved, because anytime you add rooftops and you add doors around businesses, it's going to increase pedestrian traffic, even if they have to, walk a little bit further up there. But I think there'll be benefits across the board.
So I wasn't on the board here when the town center was done, and I'm sort of curious on the standpoint, when that was built out, did a developer have a block, or was it individual lots for the development of town center?
So right about now, I wish I had Mike Todd in the room,
Okay.
our the historian of Mill Creek. But if I recall correctly, it was a fairly large development that was owned by a single developer, or I think.
Okay.
It was mostly owned by one developer who built it out in phases.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, for a big portion of this road, for at least where we're doing the commercial corridors, a big chunk of it is owned by one property, right? The Panos property. The Panos owns
All this.
The
whole
Safeway
block.
Yeah.
Right. And we own a big chunk. And so we've been sending letters. We've been in contact with some of the property owners in the area. That's going to be a big question. But again, how this happens and when this happens depends on a lot of actions. It depends a lot on kind of how the city wants to handle and approach some of these things, especially as we look at development incentives, or I don't want to say anything controversial, but if property acquisition was a thing that they were interested in, right, that could be a way that happens as well. University of Washington famously generates a huge amount of their profit because they own a bunch of downtown, right? So that's another thing that could also spark development, is a property acquisition strategy. What that looks like, it's too premature at this point, but we are anticipating maybe a piecemeal process, which is pretty normal for a lot of redevelopment areas. But I think if we keep our eye on the ball and we use smart development incentives, then I think we can probably anticipate a lot of developer interest.
I mean, the commissioner's question is good, that we should learn from the North Town Center what worked and didn't, so that as we work through with property managers and developers, we've got some of that in our back pocket.
For sure, one of the things that we learned from North Town Center is to be very specific about what type of street trees we allow. And we don't have street trees with shallow root systems that upheave our sidewalks. That's a good important lesson for us.
Okay, great. Good.
Yeah, my main things are just, I think we're underestimating the commercial side. And then just I think more utilize the North Creek Trail existence for our bicycle pedestrian friendliness.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think we're down for the good of the order, sir. You have anything else for us?
Yeah, I have a couple things for you guys. We're now live with our OpenGov permitting software. We're at about 80% of all of our permits are live. There's about a couple more permits that we still have to make sure we're nailing before those get formally live. And then we'll be anticipating being fully off our legacy permit system by February. We're fully online with the new fee system and the new fee permits. And so that is now in line. Thank you again for your input on that. Also, just a quick update, the city council did approve the critical area regulation. Again, compliments to Justin. That was identified by Department of Commerce as one of the best critical area regulation updates they've ever seen. And so we're immensely proud of that piece of legislation that we have. After adopting that, we actually got a lot of interest from other cities that are struggling with some of these issues because of the approach that you guys approved towards specifically towards riparian management zones. So again, that compliment to Justin is also a compliment to the Planning Commission. I think that we have a good relationship, and I think that we're crafting some sound municipal policy that hopefully is being emulated across the region. So we got permitting, we got the new fee structure, we got critical area regulations. And then just to keep you all a heads up, over the next coming weeks, the city is going to be reviewing data relating to annexation, as well as having some strategic review and retreats to potentially discuss annexation. I just want to let you know that it is something that is in the atmosphere. I don't know which way they're going to go, but that is a potentiality that is, and how they decide to proceed could make all of our lives very interesting or very boring. Could go either way. So between that, and then also we're about to finish up our contract with the DRCC. DRCC is another project that we're probably going to be working with y'all and some Parks and Rec and stuff on, just talk about in addition to City Council, as we go through that process of identifying partners, nailing down specific uses, and then we'll be running a review with the Planning Commission specific land use considerations for the DRCC. Justin, am I missing anything, or is that?
That's it.
Okay.
Good. Okay, thank you.
What's the initial reaction been to the fee structure increase?
No
People-
comments from applicants yet.
Yeah, as knock on wood. As far as planning fees and development fees, we haven't really received too much feedback on there. There has been some feedback and some discussion. All right, so what I was saying, Jose, is that what was I saying? We're talking about
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
So Parks and Rec is going to be involved in the DRCC discussion, and that we're looking forward to. What was that for? That's what we're saying.
No, the fee reaction.
Oh, fee reaction. That's right. That's right. What we're saying is that we have had some initial feedback regarding parks, rental fees and facilities like that, but we haven't had any specific feedback regarding our development fees. We're still going to be listening, and and we're still interested in take on people's thoughts on the new fee structure for development stuff. As far as fees are related, the only last bit of development fees that are subject to change at this point is going to be part of a sign code update and part of a tree and landscaping code update. Sign codes, we wanted to change the fees, then we realized like, oh, this is a hornet's nest, and we did not have time to talk about this because there's a lot of very strong feelings in the city about A-boards and sandwich boards. Some people love them, some people hate them, and we hear from both sides every day. So how we develop those signs and how we develop those fees is going to needs to be part of a broader conversation that we really need to be doing a strong outreach on to the business community and also the community. And same thing with trees and landscaping fees and stuff like that. So expect to have some fee discussion this upcoming year as it relates to landscaping regulations and also sign regulations.
Okay, great. So thank you for the update. Could entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
Have a motion that's moved and seconded for us to adjourn. And is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
So we are officially adjourned.